to Google you, or anyone from our city were to Google you, is there anything you feel needs to be explained? I think that's a fair question. And I did that, and you should too, because there are things out there, even these candidates that may have fair explanations, but I think need to be explained.
Public comment. Art, please state your
Art
name
Shading,
and address.
resident of Lapeer, probably lived in the city longer than anybody else here. That's besides the point. Want to commend the city for the wonderful job on the residential side streets this morning. They're fabulous.
Thank you. We'll pass that on. City staff are doing a great job. Pass it on. Ramona, Tracy, wherever. Jeremy. Okay, so I guess, James, do you?
So I'm looking pretty face for this, what's gonna happen today.
Yeah.
So we'll call on your first candidates. You have the questions provided for you. So in your packet, you have the resume, you have the questionnaires that they filled out beforehand. And then you also have the interview questions as well. I would recommend that you pick which way you want to start from, and every person take a question. One of the things is, we did do our cursory review. I've sent you some additional information on our candidates. We do more than a Google search on them, so look in their records, we call their references, find out what the story is behind them. I feel very strongly about the candidates that we have done a decent job of vetting, that issues that have come up have been explained and justified. So you'll have your questions. Work your way through them one at a time, and then Chris and I will be here, should you want us to, if we see something go off the rails or something like that, we'll try to throw a flag and bring it back into place. But your first one will be Timothy Sadowski, who's currently the Controller Administrator for the City of Keyforce, Michigan, and still employed there as well. Any questions for us to get started?
Anybody have a question? We're good?
What we'll do so what you'll want to do today is we'll interview all three candidates, and then should you find a candidate that you find acceptable, you would designate that the lead candidate. Then we move into contract negotiations and get that. We always send a sample contract to your HR director, your city attorney. They have a sample contract. You go live to basic industry standards. So this should be a fun morning. But these types of interviews could be interesting because you have the written questionnaires. The questionnaires are important because some people are really shy in writing, maybe don't shine in an interview. So you can see both of them. You can see their written responses, and that's important because that's how they're going to communicate with you a lot in the future, is written responses. So that's why we did the questionnaire. And then you'll have the verbal interviews to see how their interpersonal skills work at a live interview.
Okay.
So that was the whole point of, you had two interviews. You had the written one, and then you had the live one to just see how the candidates perform above.
Very good. Jeff, did you have questions? Expression on your face. Okay. Well, as soon as Tim gets here, then we can get rolling. We have a few minutes yet, really, this is what interviews
James, have we had communication with the candidates today to find out?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
They are all planning on attending?
Yep.
Good.
Hopefully they arrived last night.
A couple of them did.
Yeah, I bet they
A
did.
couple of them did. We're ready for that.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning,
Good
Tim.
morning.
Welcome.
Yeah,
Thank you for traveling all the way to the city of Lapeer.
Yes.
Hopefully you made it last night versus today.
No,
But,
I came this morning.
yeah, okay. Well, we're going to begin with, I will start with the first question and then we'll go to the commission. We're going to go with each one of us will address a question to them.
Okay.
So whenever you're ready.
Oh, wow.
start.
Yep.
Okay. Again, thank you and welcome to the city of Lapeer. So, well, we've had the opportunity to do an initial review and assessment of you based upon your resume and your responses to the candidate questionnaire. We would like to learn more about you as an individual. Give us a sense of who you are from a personal perspective.
On a personal perspective, I lived in the city of Madison Heights for the last year. Before that, I lived in MLA City for 10 years. At that time, I raised my daughter, that's now a 15-year-old teenager, and goes to Lapeer High School. That's why I relocated to Madison Heights from Imlay City. I've been in municipal government literally my entire career. I started at 17 in high school, working elections for the township clerk, Joanna Hardesty, and following around as an intern, watching her pay bills and deal with stuff, and went throughout my entire 20-year career to currently where I work for the city of Ecorse as the financial controller and city administrator, among numerous positions. And I also work for Fraser Public Library, City of Fraser, as their bookkeeper on the weekends, plus private accounting work. I'm an accountant. So that's a little about me personally and where I am currently.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Stroh, do you want
Sure.
to start off with the other questions?
Yes.
Please.
What prompted your decision to leave your current place of employment or look for an alternate position and apply for the city of Lapeer as the next city manager?
I did submit that in my application. I've been back full-time with the city of Ecorse now for 2 years. They brought me back as city administrator when our last city administrator left and went to the city of River Rouge. They brought me back primarily so that the city didn't go back into financial receivership, and they needed somebody with institutional knowledge to bring the city back. So they brought me back out of the city of Flint because I was literally putting out fires there. And so I decided to go back to the city of Ecorse. I've been there 2 years. And we hit a junction in December where I now have to reduce personnel basically to a non-existent place in order for the city to survive financially more than 18 months. So me and the city council are at odds. I laid off 20 city employees January 1st of 2023, and that's just the first round. So unfortunately, they don't want to see any more cuts, and I'm not willing to let them use my credentials to bankrupt the city. So we're at an impasse. And there we are.
Okay. Commissioner Swindell.
What are your impressions about our challenges and possibilities in the city of Lapeer?
Your challenges in the city of Lapeer. I read through your audit. I read through your budget. It's very standard. It's very straightforward, especially for a rural community. Very conservative, same year to year. So your pensions are pretty well funded at 80%. Retiree healthcare is at 20%. So I mean, there's room to improve there, but overall, you have cash, you have fund balance, you have operating money, you have an income tax here that most cities don't have this size. That helps you out significantly. Where you can only levy 10 mills and have the city income tax and pay your bills, I levy 65 in the city of Ecorse. So the highest tax city in the state of Michigan, compared to you guys are on the opposite end, right? One of the lower tax cities in the state of Michigan. I see you guys doing capital improvement projects, infrastructure, recreation. You're just awarded a Spark grant. I didn't get it, so congratulations on beating me. I usually beat everybody else, so I was disappointed, but congratulations for getting the Spark grant. That was great. So, it's a very strong rural community, smaller rural community, and it's financially stable.
Commissioner Patterson.
Morning. What is the most important task or function of a city manager and why?
I think it is stability and leadership. The city manager definitely implements the goals and objectives of the council, and I've always seemed to think that when we're at an impasse, it's time to go. I'm one of those few city administrators that prefer not to have a contract, and when it's time to go, it's time to go. To be honest with you. And I like being a leader that works with the city council and the staff to actually get things done. And when we're not getting things done, it doesn't make sense for me anymore. I do this for that challenge. I like economic development. I like bringing business. I like creating parks and recreation. I like going back to a community and say, 20 years later, I put that there, right? Being a part of it. That's why I do this. So I think as a city manager, the most important part is being the instrument for change, making sure the projects happen, make sure staff is happy, that they come to work, that they want to be there. Most of my city employees want to follow me, so if you have any open positions, I think I could fill all of them. It's a lot of, it's important to have a strong city manager, because if you don't, nobody's really happy in the organization, whether it be the board or the employees or the residents, right? So.
Commissioner Katane?
Okay. Good morning, Timothy.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here so early on a
Yes.
wonderful 10-inch of snow day. Share, if you can, share some examples of how you collaborated with, say, municipal leaders in current or past roles.
Right. So I do a lot of collaboration. I was able to receive $11 million in grants in the last 18 months. Those are just the grants that I brought in, not the other departments. So collaboration between Wayne County, the state of Michigan, we're trying to redevelop brown sites. The biggest project for E-Course is considered Mill Street redevelopment. That is a former U.S. Steel site. We have been trying to redevelop that since the city purchased it in 2004. 60 acres. You guys have 60 acre site. You would like to develop very size, size. You have 9,000 people. E-Course has 9,000. You have a 60 acre site. We have a 60 acre site. Very, very, very similar. So trying to get that redeveloped. As you know, you have to have public utilities, you have to have roads, you have to have electric and natural gas access, it has to be accessible to the freeway. All these things have to go, and then funding is the real issue, right? Where do you come up with funding? So you have to collaborate, right, with people that have more money than you, which is the county and the state and the feds. Trying to get them buy-in is very difficult, especially when you're only 9,000 people and nobody really cares about small cities, right? And nobody really cares about cities in the thumb, I hate to tell you. I worked in the thumb for a long time. So it was really hard. It's really hard to get a seat at the table. And that's what I've been doing in E-Course the last year, is trying to get a seat at the table, just to get somebody to push our agenda for us, which I've been successful at. Wayne County gave us $3.5 million for our road improvement to the site. That didn't come from, they don't like handing out money. So essentially we had to beat down their door and go down and, weekly meetings with them. They threw every roadblock possible not to give us money to get that $3.5 million. The MEDC threw money at us to buy homes for road to demolish. I actually had to acquire 14 properties in 2 weeks. I went door to door and did it myself. To get that truck route in. So those are kind of some of the things, working with state, local, federal agencies. We used our ARPA funds to buy homes for the road too. So all of that is how I work with other agencies, pretty much. Don't say no until they send us a check.
Commissioner?
As a city manager, what groups would you expect to communicate with on a regular basis? And what would you do to establish and keep channels of communication open?
So groups, definitely we work with our Economic Development Corporation, trying to get in jobs. There's also, where you guys have a Chamber of Commerce and things like that. Some cities don't, we don't have one. But usually that's a big one, right, for getting the businesses involved. You guys have a DDA on the brownfield, trying to get, again, those entities involved here. We're not big, we don't have enough business to have one, so. I would work with all those groups, definitely trying to get the money from the state as as I had answered, due to the change of the election results, the budgeting in the state of Michigan is changing very rapidly right now, which is going to open up a lot of funding opportunities for government. And it's going to be a very competitive process trying to get those funds out of the state legislature and the governor's office. And so trying now to get those funds is what we've been doing, lobbying those individuals. Currently, they have been requesting budget appropriations for the last 2 months, trying to get our priority over every other city. Has been interesting. The mayor scheduling meetings with those individuals weekly, trying to push our agenda, because once that funding's gone, it's going to be gone forever. So those are the types of doors I would be knocking on right now. Is the state of Michigan has never had so much money ever, and trying to get your piece out of it, competing with every other local government in the state of Michigan, is going to be difficult in the very soon future.
Let's go back to, okay, how do you envision getting engaged within the community of Lapeer?
Getting engaged in the community of Lapeer, yeah. You definitely have to attend the meetings, right? You have to be involved. Like I said, you have to go to the chamber, you have to go to the DDA meetings. You just have to attend the meetings and get to know people. Or if they come knock down your door, which is usually the lineup from the complaints from the last administration, come follow you the first week, right? So either they find you or you find them, one way or another, they're gonna come find you. So that's usually how it works. It's usually not that hard. And then they usually put your paper, picture on the front page of the paper, which, makes it hard to, not say that you're here. So everybody's gonna find you, right? Everybody knows it's a small town. Everybody's Googled you already. Everybody knows your history. And so, right, I used to go to lunch, and by the time I got back, everybody in town knew what I had for lunch. So I used to, well, joys of working in a small town, right? So, of course, and if you ordered the wrong thing, they knew that too. So, I imagine that's how, and it's always been like, I've worked in small communities my entire life. It's always been like that. And you come back 10 minutes from your lunch break, and everybody knows. So it's a different environment working for a small community than it was working for a larger community that Flint, that nobody could care less, right? Nobody knows who you are, nobody knows where you are, nobody cares at all, compared to a small community that everybody knows everybody's business. It's just a different environment.
Commissioner Stroh?
Would you please provide an overview and assessment of the biggest professional failure?
My biggest professional failure. I think my biggest professional failure was Roscommon when I went up there. To be honest with you, the state had given us 40 acres to redevelop, and I was trying to bring in a miter to create 300 jobs. And the local florist decided that would be a business competition and went to the city council, and that was the end of that project. And I figured there was no need for me to work in Roscommon anymore after that. So, yeah, I think that's probably my biggest professional failure, is going to Roscommon, because they did not want change, and I'm the wrong person to hire if you don't want to see growth. There's a lot of managers that are more politicians. Shake hands, kiss babies, go door to door, free to meet people. A lot of city managers are like that. I am an operational manager. I do hands-on. I've worked from the bottom up. So completely different than what most city administrators are. My door lines up usually for the first 3 hours of the day with city employees trying to get functional job done, tasks done. Most city managers don't even touch those things. So it's just completely different between an operational manager and a mostly city manager that goes to meetings and runs politics and calls the city council. I've never called the city council in 7.5 years at the city of Ecorse. They have no reason. They come to see me at the city council meetings, and that's it. They don't reach out. They like how things are running. They get my bi-weekly reports. They're very thorough. And they pretty much leave me alone. It's about, that's probably why I've been there the longest, is because up until recently, they haven't questioned the decision I've made, pretty much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Swindell?
Would you please give us an example of how you handled the rejection or dismissal of your ideas or policies in a professional context?
Right, sometimes I don't have my agenda items go. Usually they're have set, like if they're set on a city attorney, I recommended one city attorney, they hired a different city attorney, and I have to work with the city attorney, and that's just what it is. Fortunately, the mayor and city council appoint those positions, and if they appoint somebody else, I work with them, whether I think they're the right fit or not. So that has happened in the last year. For some reason, I usually don't get my choice of city attorney, and the city attorney works directly for the city commission and not for the city administrator. So that's kind of interesting. But as far as other agenda items that they didn't go my way, water rates, sometimes they haven't implemented water rates. They postponed them for a year. Kind of unfortunate to postpone capital projects because they just cost more the future year, and then I just have to increase the rates more the following year. But they did make that choice during COVID, not to increase water rates for 2 years, which postponed projects. But they didn't want to push that onto the residents. As I said, the city council has to decide whether it's going to absorb costs or pass them on to the residents as costs increase. During that time, they decided to stop projects and absorb those costs and not pass it to the residents. A lot of communities did the same things, but postponed projects. Now, projects are twice as much as what they were 2 years ago, and now they're saying, oh, that probably wasn't the greatest idea in the world. Now I'm taxing my residents to death. Okay, but you guys made that choice. So it is what it is. The city council has to decide those choices. That's why they get elected, right? They set the taxes, they set the water and sewer rates, they set all these policy decisions, as I said. And it's the city administrator's job to implement those policies. And that was just a choice the city council made.
Commissioner Cassidy?
Please describe a situation that exemplifies your philosophy on leadership.
My philosophy on leadership is definitely not to be a micromanager and definitely hire people qualified to do the job. If not, it just causes problems in the short and long term. That is why there are so many vacant positions in the city of Ecorse, and why I do so many jobs is because I can't find quality candidates to fill any of the positions, and to contract it out costs so much. It's just absurd nowadays. I think as a manager, it is important to retain employees and have institutional knowledge, because if you lose those good employees, your community is definitely going to pay for it. I think as a manager, making sure that people are getting reasonable pay and benefits as much as you can and can afford is important to provide stability for your community. Not every city council agrees with that. I was at Imlay City, we had a 90% fund balance, and they hardly ever wanted to give a raise. Not because I couldn't afford it, because they didn't want to. Definitely a different perspective, which is okay. I've worked for communities that are 99% Republicans and 99% Democrat. I do whatever the city council wants and orders and sets their policies, and I'll go implement it. It's just, it's what I do as a manager. Like I said, I don't do this. I do this. I like to see growth. I like to create jobs. I like to have employees that come to work. I like to see recreation projects is why I do this. It's not for the politics. I'm definitely not a politician. So definitely more straightforward, more of an operational manager.
Commissioner Potato.
This one's kind of a multi-parter. So an example of how you work to shape the culture of previous organizations that you worked for, what type of culture did you attempt to cultivate and why?
The culture I attempt to create. I think it's important to have a strong image. The culture, like I said, I think it's important to retain what you have and then build upon it. I like as a culture to constantly try to improve and make it more efficient, to save money. Obviously, if you want to reduce taxes, you have to become more efficient. And bringing in that culture from paying more for technology up front has paid off in the long run, such as like BSNA programming. That's how I'm able to do so many jobs, programming the modules, having them online to residents to get more people to pay their bills so we have better cash flow so we can do more stuff. That kind of culture, right? Making it easy for them, make it easy for us. It's a win-win. I like win-wins because if they're happy, I'm happy, and they leave me alone. And that's what I kind of really go for, is making them happy, making the board happy, making the people happy, and then I can get my job done. And then it's everything's better when everybody's happy. And I kind of strive for that culture. I don't like confrontation. I'm not a confrontational person. I prefer working things out. I prefer trying to plan and organize so we don't hit that point of confrontation. And usually when we do hit that point of confrontation, whether it's termination or whatever else, people fire themselves. I usually sit one-on-one with them to create that culture. Most people say, yep, I screwed up and resigned rather than being terminated. I don't think I've really had to terminate too many people. Most of them just resign and walk away. That's okay. And not everybody's made out for this job, right? And if they want to go and do something else, I usually help them transition for something else. I don't want to ruin somebody's life either. So that's kind of culture I bring in. I'd rather have it win for the organization, even if it means promoting them out. So that's me.
Commissioner Atwood.
Yeah, what is the most difficult professional relationship you have had, and how have you managed ongoing interactions with others?
Yes, it's definitely with board members, right? Every board has one. Every community has one, or one resident. It may not be a commissioner, it may be a resident. Everybody has that. Every community has that one person that goes through every single item and points out every single problem and drags it out and comes embarrasses you at city council meetings and everything else, right? Everybody has that one resident. Everybody knows who it is. I don't have to live here, and I know there's one. So yeah, I've had those residents. I've been boycotted against by those people. And it comes with the job. If you can't take the criticism, you probably shouldn't do this job. And working with those individuals, usually they end up as my best friends, even if they boycott me, because I give them all the information and tell them what they want. I don't make them FOIA or anything else, because it's your right to come yell against the government if you don't like what we're doing. I get it. You don't want me to raise your water and sewer rates, but I can't pay my bills if I don't. So here's the information and here's our calculations, and tell them I'm a jerk, and that's okay. But I'm going to do it anyway because we have bills to pay and we have to be responsible. And that's kind of how I go about it. And usually we agree to disagree, and that's okay. And they usually become quiet and don't really say anything. Because, like I said, we all have one, and they usually embarrass themselves when they talk, right? And everybody ignores them. But that's okay. Like I said, I'd rather work with that person and say, this is why we're doing this. You may not agree. Here's your information, and this is why we're doing it anyway. And it is what it is. We're not all going to agree.
If a department has more work than can be accomplished with current resources, how would you approach the problem solving in that situation and why?
Historically, I picked up the work, unfortunately. Your other opportunities are, contracting it out or bringing in somebody temporary. I've had to do that. I have had to do that, especially with building services, assessing. Those jobs are being harder and harder to fill. Those require certified people to fill those jobs, and they just don't make those people anymore, right? So you have assessors working 3, 4, 5 communities. You have building inspectors working 3, 4, 5 communities. And unfortunately, we're going to the consolidation of services. I think it was in your budget, trying to bring in other cities to work for pay for your building services because you've lost building permits, et cetera, right? So either you have to consolidate services, find the money somewhere else, or contract it out, or somebody in the organization has to take on the extra workload, which is usually me, which is stressful. And that's usually your only options because you only have so many options in government. But you have to get the job done because we're regulated and we have deadlines and by the state. So it's not like a business where you can say, oh, I'll just stop producing that line of retail because it's not making me any money. I can't just stop building inspections. I can't just stop assessing. I have to provide the service somehow. So it has to get done.
Commissioner Stroh?
Yes. As we move forward or toward concluding our time together, would you tell us some attributes or characteristics of note that would differentiate yourself from the other candidates which have applied for this position of city manager?
What differentiates me from any other candidate is pretty much my hands-on knowledge. I started at the bottom and worked my way up. Most city administrators, financial controllers start at the top. And when that happens, they're not able to do the jobs of the people that work for them. That creates a lot of problems when they don't know, or you have employee turnover or things that they need answers for because there's nowhere to go to get the answer. And based on that hands-on knowledge, that's why I say employees are lined up the door usually to see me, is because they have questions on how to do their job. And there's one person you can always go in the city to get the answer, which is me, because I've done every single job. From utility billing to cash receipts to treasurer to city clerk, city manager. Every single job you can think of in administration I've done or do currently. And so that's what separates me apart. On top of that, I am a planner and a goal-oriented person. That means I strategize on how to get the most out of my dollar. And how I do that recently is planning, especially for engineering. And the reason why I'm so able to bring so much money to the table is because the city council tells me what projects they want to get done and I do them. And I do that by having the engineering get done in advance. And people say, why do you pay for the engineering in advance if the grant will pay 80% of it? And I tell them, well, I have to compete with the city of Detroit. And the city of Detroit's going to get the money regardless if they do the engineering or not. And know what? Nobody cares about the city of Detroit. So I have everything out. I have my drawings. I have my sketches. I have the bid documents. I have everything ready to go. So when I send it to some bureaucrat down there at the federal or state government, and I go, oh, I just have to fund this project and hit submit. How do you think I got $11.3 million in the last 18 months? That's how. So, yeah, so we paid a little bit more up front, but we got a lot more money in the end. And so it really worked. And so the mayor and the city council bought into my idea when I came back, and it's paid off. I think we probably spent $1 million in engineering for the 40 projects we have going on, and we got 11 million in return. And I don't know about you, but I think I would take that money. But not every community would do that. I don't know if this city council would do that. It's a high risk, right? Risk reward. So it paid off for the city of Ecorse. It did not necessarily pay off for every community. But I knew with the Biden administration and all the federal dollars coming out, and I had to compete with all my regional partners in Southeast Michigan, the only way to do that was to be ahead of everybody else. So I did it, and it worked. So There you go.
So finally, is there anything you would like to tell Madam Mayor and us commissioners to know before we end our discussion? Or do you have any key questions for us at this time?
My key question always for the city commission is I've always worked 7 days a week my entire career since I've been in high school. That has usually been a deal breaker at a lot of communities. That's why I'm not at the city of Harper Woods now, is because simply stating they pay about $120,000 a year, about what this community pays. And part-time work, I make more than that on the weekends. Not to say that's a bad thing, it's just because there's a lot of work out there and you can see a lot of people doing multiple jobs. So that is one thing that is usually a deal breaker for me. That is why I did not go to Harper Woods in 2022. Fraser Public Library pays me $250 an hour. It's not bad money. So things like that is an incentive for me to take a pay cut. I do make $150,000 a year at eCourse. They did offer me $180,000 to stay. It is not enough. I imagine they will probably offer me more on Tuesday. Somewhere probably $200,000 to $250,000 to stay. I don't even know if I would take that amount of money, but that is something the city commission should understand. Also, I do eight full-time equivalent jobs at the city of eCourse. I'm the only administrator and finance officer in the city. So I do everything from accounts payable, payroll, miscellaneous receipts, administration, treasurer, taxes, everything. I'm the only person there. That's why you see 5 posted jobs at the city of eCourse right now. Those are that's what I'm at personally as a candidate. And that's where the city of eCourse is at. And so those would be that would be my a deal breaker for me, just so that the city commission knows that in advance.
I guess we'll move into any of the commissioners do have any other additional questions that have come about from some of these answers?
No, not for themselves.
I feel, I always like to ask this question. So let's say state wakes up one day, goes, city of Lapeer, here's $1 million just for being awesome. How would you go about spending that money?
I would leverage it, and that's what I do. I get this $1 million from the state. I leverage it with the county. I leverage it with the feds to make it $3 million. I just don't take the million and run and spend it like most communities. I will use that money to leverage for a larger project and actually get a return on investment, and essentially pay usually between 0 and 10% of the city's money and get a $3 million project. You can see that's what I've done in eCourse. I'm literally spending between $50,000 and $100,000 of city taxpayer dollars in getting $1 million project. All these projects you see by leveraging state, county, and federal dollars, and that's what I would do. I just want to take $1 million and
Mine is kind of a 2-part question.
yes.
Why would you like to work in the city and live here? And why? No, we'll just go with that. Why would you like to work for the city?
I applied for the city of Lapeer. Like I said, I lived in Lapeer County for the last decade. I am very familiar. As you know, there's not very much in LA City, so retail, shopping, restaurants. I was here 2 to 3 times a week, right, for the last decade. So I'm very familiar with this. I know people that live here. And so it's very comfortable. The size is also very comfortable for me. I usually try to stay 15,000 and under because I like the hands-on approach. And as soon as you get bigger than 15,000 people, you get lost. So I also like that idea that you're the right size for me. I also like you're financially stable and I don't have to worry about going bankrupt. And I also like that you guys have a MERS defined pension plan. A lot of cities don't have that option here. A lot of them still have the defined contribution, so you basically have to work until you're dead to retire. So that's a lot of reasons. And then you guys have changed for infrastructure and recreation and programming stuff. That's one of the stuff I like doing. So I would like to come here and actually do that stuff rather than go to a community that's not gonna do anything and I'll be bored out of my mind, right? So I really don't want to be bored out of my mind either. So if you guys, seems like you guys are interested in doing projects and improvement and recreation, you applied for grants. So obviously you guys have some incentive of improving the community, right? So that's why I applied.
Yeah, I guess. That was just a half.
That was me.
Oh, okay. Well, then I would like to thank you for taking the time to be here today.
Yes.
And James, we'll get back to you later on.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I recommend a short recess to your next meeting.
Yes.
Yes. So we'll have,
Oh, thank you.
well, the next interview is, oh, we're way ahead of schedule. We better come up with more questions.
We could talk a little
You
slower.
just go over it side by side.
It's a recess for 30 minutes, Madam Mayor?
I guess so, because the
Okay.
next interview is at 9:30, according to the schedule. Now, they may come a little bit earlier, but.
Do you have to gavel? Do you have to gavel or break?
No, because the meeting's still open.
Okay, cool. So we can stretch.
Stretch, have yourself a coffee, water, etc.
Oh, it's gonna be a long
Oh, you are too, that's why you're taking your coat. That's why you're taking your coat.
No.
This is the worst feeling in the world.
You do.
No, I had a couple questions.
Yeah.
We're allowed to. I think it is.
Really?
An hour shoveling my way out of my car.
I guess they can't hear me. I gotta try to look up more. Everybody will be wondering on tape
Clean
while
my
I'm
car
looking up.
off.
Then maybe I'll be
I
more,
don't have to shovel.
you can hear me more, instead of kind of looking down. I'm looking at the camera. What else I wanna do? I should put that chick.
So you know how to talk.
Okay, so I forgot.
That's why you look at the last one.
No, who did we? That's what I wanted to know. I'm not gonna start out, I wanted to continue to go. Yeah,
Okay.
instead of me starting and going again.
Hey, you're the mayor.
I know, I just, well,
Going in the
that.
same order then?
Yeah, we're gonna go, we're just gonna continue to go. Jeff will start.
Oh,
You should do it.
Do you want me to go exactly the same thing?
well,
No.
I didn't want to show you guys yet.
Go to Jeff. Yep. You start to go
All
to
right, oh, okay. Very good. I'll do that.
Jeff. 'Cause you're the mayor.
Well, I was just gonna go in the same order, but
Okay, that's
that's fine, that's fine. I can do that.
good.
Well, I was gonna welcome
Yeah,
him.
most of these words.
I'm gonna welcome him.
Are we changing order?
Either way. No,
She's gonna.
I'm gonna just start,
She's
but
gonna go
then I will
one, two,
go,
it's gonna go this way.
Jeff, because he would have been the next commissioner to ask a question. So we'll kind of just continue the order, but I'm gonna start because I'm gonna welcome them anyway.
Hello, everybody. Good morning.
Good morning.
Certainly is a different view on the camera.
Outside is a different view.
Yes. And I managed to get inside without falling, so it's a good thing.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Troy, for being here, and we're excited for this interview.
Very excited to be here. Thank you.
So, well, we each are gonna ask some questions of you. I will start. So we have had the opportunity to do an initial review, an assessment of you based upon the resume and your responses to the candidate questionnaire. We would like to learn a little bit more about you as an individual, which will give us a sense of who you are and from a personal perspective. So if you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, and I'm glad you had an opportunity to take a look at the resume, so I won't bore you by going into that. Essentially, I come from a public service environment. My father is a retired general officer in the Army. My mother was a special education teacher for 36 years, also a professor in special education. So it was very difficult for us, the youngest of four, to come from that family without being in public service. I have two older sisters, both of them are in public service, an older brother who is a physician with the VA public service, and here I am. So that is the foundation from which I come from. We were raised with the idea that if you see something that needs to be changed, you have a responsibility, if you have the ability, the skills and ability to do so, to try to change it. And if you don't try to change it, you have no right to say anything until you try to change it. And so that is the foundation from which I come from, and that is what led me into public service. I am a family man. My wife is a professor, English education. I have to make sure I get that right because she will be listening. I have a 15-year-old daughter, and so if any of you have any advice on how to handle a 15-year-old daughter, I would appreciate that. And I have two boys that are 10 and 8. So family is very important to me. It's a huge part of every decision that we make. We make it as a group. And so coming here is important because of the opportunities that are there for me and my family. And so I wanted to make sure that you're clear and aware that family is an important aspect of it. From that standpoint, that's who I am as an individual. I got into public service because of the foundation, but also because of a desire to serve, to be able to make the spaces that I interact with, that I engage with, better as a result of having been there, having been part of that space. And so everywhere that I go, I'm always looking with that approach and that idea of how can I make this space. And I'm sure you, in the capacity that you're in there as elected public officials, you understand the idea of and how important it is to make the spaces that you come into better because of the fact that you're there. Not everybody is called to public service. It is challenging. It's much easier to stand on the sidelines rather than to get into the parade and walk down the street. The people on the sidelines, it's a lot easier for them to throw rocks. And for us in public service, we have to figure out a way to still provide services and still move forward. And so that's who I am as an individual. And hopefully I answered your question.
Commissioner Patterson.
Good morning.
Good morning.
What prompted you to apply to be the city of Lapeer's next city manager?
Sure. So I was prompted because I saw an opening that was here, and quite frankly, I had an opportunity to speak with the previous city manager. Both of us are quite involved in the Michigan Municipal League, and as a branch of that, the Michigan Municipal Executives. And from my conversation with him, I began to do more research, inquiry into the city, and I saw that it was a beautiful community. There are many similarities with my background and the opportunity to be the type of person that you need to be able to take the organization to the next level. And I saw that opportunity to be able to enhance what's already there, to be able to build on the foundation that already exists. And so that was exciting to me because as a city manager, when you look at other opportunities, you want to make sure that you're in a position to be to have value add when you come to an organization. And so I saw what I thought would be the potential to be able to provide that value add. And then the opportunity for my family, the schools that are here, the options that are available there were important to me as well. And then finally, on a professional level, my wife has opportunities here in education in Michigan. And so it would be an opportunity that is good for me as well as for my spouse.
Commissioner Katane.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
What are your impressions so far about the challenges and possibilities for the city of Lapeer?
Well, with regard to challenges, I think you're going to be faced with, and you probably got a chance to see the questionnaire that I responded to. So some of that is in there, so forgive me for repeating some of this. But for economic change, economic development, that's a huge part. I see, I got a chance last week to tour Lapeer, to look around, and you are sitting at the gateway to Canada. And so being able to leverage those opportunities and economic development and growth are important. But it's got to be smart growth. It can't just be growth for the sake of growth. There has to be a balance there. One of the aspects that I've been successful in my history is finding that balance. How do you create growth, but at the same time recognize and be considerate of the residents and the desires that they have for additional services, for enhanced services? There's got to be a balance, and there's got to be an understanding about that balance that oftentimes a lot of communities miss. They don't do a good job in educating the community on the choices and the difficulty of those choices in order to achieve that balance. I also see the need to be able to move into the 21st century. Technology is a huge aspect of being able to provide better services, more efficient and more effective services. I really appreciated the scenario that you offered about throwing a rock into a pond, because there's going to be ripple effects as a result of that. And so hiring a new city manager, you can't just hire anybody. You have to hire somebody who is both capable
and suitable for the organization. And that's an important decision that you're going to have to make. I hope, looking at my information, you saw that I am capable. The background that I bring to the table, I think, says that I can do the job, and I believe that I can do it well. But the question that you also have to answer is whether or not I'm a good fit for the organization. I do believe that I can move the organization forward, that I can be part of change to build on the foundation that's already there. I don't intend to come into an organization as a leader and change everything. I look for organizations where I can provide value add, where I can enhance the organization, where I can build on the foundation that's there. And I think you have a good foundation here already. Now, is there an opportunity for me to tweak here, to tweak there, to look at things from a fresh perspective, with fresh eyes, and be able to see opportunities for change? Yes, I believe so. I think some of the other issues that you're looking at is infrastructure. Every organization across the country is going to be wrestling with infrastructure. I'm happy to say, as a former water and sewer engineer, that I have an eye on the infrastructure in everything that I do. It's easy for the public to look at clean streets and green grass and not realize what's underneath. And what's underneath is important, because in 5-10 years, that can come back to haunt you. So what you do today, the difficult decisions that you make now, will affect what happens 5, 10, 15 years from now. And so having an understanding of infrastructure, having an eye on that, I think is very important for this council, and one of the things that you're going to wrestle with. And then finally, I would say communications. You're going to have to, moving into the 21st century, have somebody that's a good communicator. That's not only orally, but on a written level. But I would say communication is a two-way street. It's important for the person in my role to understand what your preferred methods of communications are as a council, and be able to meet you where you want to be in terms of communication. But when I say it's a two-way street, I mean that it's important to be clear on what you feel needs to be communicated, what and how often that you want to be communicated. I believe that every organization is better when you work together. I mean, unity is a huge part. And even though the citizens have elected, I shouldn't say even though, the citizens have elected you as council members, commission members, to be their fiduciary responsible parties for where the city goes. But the city can't go there unless we're all united in that objective. And you can only do that by communication, by transparency, by educating the public as well as the commission on where the city is and what you're attempting to do. Everybody is better together, working together. And I believe there's an opportunity for one Lapeer and one future. And you can only achieve that successfully if you work together, and that is built on the foundation of communication.
Commissioner Evans?
Good morning.
Good morning.
What is the most important task or function of a city manager and why?
So I think that the city manager needs to be focused on running an organization, making sure that the organization meets the operational objectives. The commission has the responsibility to outline goals and objectives. Understanding what the roles and responsibilities are for a manager versus the commission is important. The manager has to be able to lead and manage the organization to achieve the operational objectives of the commission. I mean, that's key. Why do I say lead and manage? Management is making sure that the trains run on time. Management is making sure that there is collaboration, a team of teams. Management is making sure that the risks to operations are addressed. Leadership is that aspect of change. Where do we enhance this? Where do we enhance that? Where do we make modifications that allow us to improve the organization? A great manager is somebody who can both lead and manage. I had the benefit to be able to sit at the feet of my father and watching him change from being a field officer to from a company officer to a field officer. And one of the important things that I learned in that process, and the people that he came in contact, like General Colton, that believed that when you make that transition, you go from managing, you're no longer putting out fires, you're curating processes and procedures, you're curating systems. And so as a manager, it's important that you evaluate your team, understand where you can provide value to your team leaders, but make sure you create an environment for collaboration so that that team of teams can be as effective and efficient as possible. That's how you achieve a highly effective organization, through the collaboration of your teams. And so one thing I would leave you with is this, that as you make your decision, I want you to consider not just finding a manager that will address what you need today, but finding a manager that can grow with the organization, that can pivot with the organization to be the leadership that you need today, but also the leadership that you need 3, 5, and 10 years from now. And so that flexibility, that versatility is something that I hope that you look for in a manager, and that's, I believe, what gives me the edge as a candidate for this position.
Commissioner Strong.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you give us an example on how you've worked with other elected municipalities or municipal leaders in your previous roles? And you've been all over the country, so
Yes, sir.
I'm sure it's quite varied, but you can give us examples.
Certainly. So I talked a little bit about my role in MME. And so I sit on multiple state committees, and that allows me to stay abreast of what's happening in the state, to stay in the middle of it and understand the trends that are associated with that. But also I sit on several, three national committee positions with ICMA. Again, that gives me a view and a vantage point of the entire country. So through those associations and interactions, I've had the opportunity in my most recent role to work with local government entities, the surrounding communities who are around the organization that I work for, and being able to create relationships with them, being able to create opportunities for engagement. Again, because we're better together, we understand in local government that sometimes we can reduce the cost to our organizations by working together. And so I was able to create that in my most recent position with the organizations around me. In addition to that, my education background, I had an opportunity to work with the school district. They appreciated the background that I had and what I was able to provide as input there. And again, we created a relationship that wasn't there prior to that. Also with MDOT and MEDC, state organizations, they want to understand that you have a sense of stability in the organization, so that they invest time, resources, and funding into your organization, that you're going to be there to carry it through. And so I was able to do that in developing those relationships, and that's why I was successful in bringing in close to $40 plus million worth of revenue into the organization. So I think those are examples of intergovernmental interaction and relationship building. The key to relationship building is building genuine, sincere, non-transactional relationships. And I think those last and they stay with you. And I hope you had an opportunity to see some of the recommendation letters that I had from those entities that I did work with.
Thank you.
Commissioner Swindle? As a city manager, what groups would you expect to communicate with on a regular basis? And what would you do to establish and keep those channels of communication open?
So I think as a city manager, it's important that you engage with all stakeholders. When I become part of an organization in a leadership capacity, I think it's important not to come in with this preconceived notion of what needs to be done and what you're going to do. You need to come in with a listening tour, and that's something that's important to me, to be able to look, to listen, to learn, and then to understand what are the pain points of the organization, what are the pain points of the stakeholders, what keeps you up at night. When I worked for IBM, and this is one of those areas that I think a lot of organizations and cities overlook, because it was one of the best experiences that I could have had, because I worked in state and local government. So I had an opportunity along the East Coast to work with all the state and local government entities and be able to have conversations with them about what are your pain points, what keeps you up at night, and how can I use technology to be able to make you better at your job, to enhance your job. That's the same type of approach I think as a city manager you have on an organizational level. You have to have that listening tour with the commission. And I always ask when I conclude, is there somebody else that you think that I should meet with? And that's also the businesses, the business leaders. That's the residents, the residents leaders. That's nonprofit organizations across the board. And you have a number of nonprofit organizations here, which is excellent foundation that I think that I can build on. But it's also dealing with all the stakeholders across the organization across the board. And so communicating, understanding, and then synthesizing that so that you can begin to lead is important. But I'd like to make sure that we continue that communication and that dialogue. I think project management software is very good that you can access as a commissioner and also as a resident or business. I think it's important that you use newsletters. The website, you have a great website as it is now, enhancing that opportunity for people to engage with it. Unfortunately, websites are flat two-dimensional, so you have to look for a third dimension, which allows you to reach out into the community and have that communication. Having been a school superintendent, that was one of the things that I appreciated the most, was being able to communicate using software, an app, directly with the parents of my kids. And so that's something that we should look at in every job that I'm in, and being able to communicate directly with the residents and keeping them abreast of what I as a manager and attempting to do and leading this organization to meet the goals and objectives of the commission. I'm not going to pretend to suggest or come in and say that you should do this, that, or the other. You already have a good idea of where you want to go and where to lead this organization. That's not my role and responsibility. I do have that background where I can provide leadership in those areas if desired. And perhaps once you get into the work that we're doing, that you'll see there's an opportunity based on information that you didn't see before coming from the city manager to change some of those goals and objectives. But to build on that, I think is the responsibility of the manager. And I think that's part of communicating with all the residents and stakeholders.
Yes. How do you envision yourself getting involved in the community of Lapeer?
That's a very good question, and that goes back to my original statement about being a family. I believe that just like a chef in a kitchen, that a cook should eat what you cook. And so you will see that this is a package deal for me. It comes with my family. So when there are activities that are family friendly, you'll see not only me there and participating in those activities, but my family as well. It's important to me that my kids understand, again, because of the interest in public service, that their father is involved in making sure that this is a better place and that they're part of that process. So I envision coming into Lapeer, if I was fortunate enough to be selected as the manager, to be part of the fabric of the community, to be part of the activities of the community that we engage in, to be able to engage directly with the stakeholders. I am not the type of manager that manages from behind a desk. So I am, and hopefully that's what you're looking for, but I will tell you up front, I'm the type of manager that is out, visible, and engaging with the community. And so I see that as where I would be in this community. And it's a beautiful community. Like I said, I got a chance to tour last week, and unfortunately, Cream wasn't open until 10 o'clock today, so I had to go to Starbucks. But that's who I am as a manager and as a person.
Could you provide an overview and assessment of your biggest professional failure?
So, and one of the things that I've said in my package is that we have to be willing to to stumble in order to lead. That sometimes, and I don't like to use the word failure because I think in every setback, as long as you learn from the process, you learn from the circumstances, that's an opportunity for you to move forward faster and better. And so I've had a number of situations where I've been able to learn from those situations. The area that my staff has helped me in growing has been in engaging with them as a part of the objectives the commission has set. For instance, when I, as a manager, get involved, I'm the type to roll up my sleeves and jump right in. So if I see something that's wrong, I'll get in and I'll do something about it. I don't expect my staff to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. And so you'll see publications about me stopping and picking up trash because it needed to be done. And I wouldn't ask any of my staff to do any less. Where I have struggled is that high expectation that I've had for staff. I've learned that I have to meet staff where they're at, and they're not accustomed to those high expectations. They're not, in many cases, accustomed to a manager that rolls up his sleeves and gets involved. And so meeting them where they're at, coaching them up to that point is an area where I would say that I've grown and that I had difficulty. And then quite frankly, having worked in many different places in the country, I am still learning snow removal. So that is one of those areas that you constantly get better at. So it's trial and error, you learn, and never will you find that one snow is the same as the next. So it's a learning process in and of itself.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Katane.
Okay. Let's see. Can you share with us some example? How have you handled rejection or dismissal of your ideas or policies?
So that's always a difficult thing. As a manager, it's our responsibility to provide the commission with the best possible information that is available at the time. You want to know the pros and cons of a situation. And I think what I've been successful in is anticipating difficulties before they actually become problems or challenges. And so what I would say that when I am faced with disappointment, it's usually when you have a situation where you've advised counselor, commissioner of the board, these are the pros and cons, and that is a situation that is left up to the commission to make a final decision on. If that decision is not exactly what you recommend, that's disappointing. But it's one of those things where you have to continue to move forward with what the council or the commission's perspective is. I will give you an example. When I came to my most recent organization, there was an ordinance in place for vacant buildings. That ordinance had not been enforced. It was passed in 2009, and I discovered in 2019 that it had been sitting dormant. That vacant building fee said that if you had a vacant structure, that you had to register it every year, and every year that you register it, there's a fee associated with the registering, and each year that fee accelerates. And so when I brought that to my commission, they agreed to move forward in enforcing it. However, once I began to move forward in enforcing it, I discovered that my commission wasn't very happy with that. And so that was a difficult situation that I was asked to scale back. And so that was one of the disappointments. But through education and understanding around what the objectives were, that wasn't designed to create revenue. It was designed to change behavior. That was the focus of that ordinance, to be able to get people to take the structures that they had and get them back on the tax rolls as operational entities. And so through that coaching process, we eventually got to where we needed to be.
Commissioner Atwood?
Describe a situation that exemplifies your philosophy of leadership.
So I've talked a little bit about this. My philosophy about leadership is, aside from how I conduct myself as an individual, being open, engaging, being friendly and calm and my demeanor. When chaos hits, people should be able to look at a leader and understand that that leader is focused on solutions, not on the hysteria associated with problems. And that's an aspect of my philosophy of leadership. I ascribe to the research that was done by James Q. Wilson, J.Q. Wilson, and he did research on hundreds of municipal organizations throughout the country to find that the high functioning organizations had three things in common. One was that they had a clear understanding what the critical activity was. What are you there for? What's your raison d'etre? What is your reason for being? The second thing was a consensus in the organization about how you go about achieving that critical activity. You have those two things, and that creates culture in your organization. And then the third thing that you have is you need to have the resources necessary for the people to be successful in achieving those goals and objectives. If you can have that, that gives you not only culture, but vision. So my approach to leadership has always been to make sure that we have those three things in place and that the organization is focused on achieving that critical activity. An example of that would be when I was with the Water Management District. When I came on board, it was a $480 million project that I managed, and it was in chaos. And I was able to bring staff together, the contractors, the engineers, the QA, QC folks, and staff, and say, what are we trying to achieve with this $480 million? What is our objective? And by defining what that objective was, and by pulling together those three aspects, we were able to reduce our additional charges for that project. The contingencies fees that were out of hand, I think they were like the 30 or 40%, down to zero in terms of contingency costs. And so that was a successful project that basically followed my philosophy of leadership.
Commissioner Stroh.
And you've hit on some of this already, but I'm going to ask the question again. Maybe there's more that you can share with us. Give us examples of how you've worked to shape a culture in a previous organization that you've worked for, and what types of culture did you attempt to cultivate and why?
So yes, I haven't touched on that, but one aspect that I haven't addressed is my fondness for strategic planning. And that's has served me well in any organization that I've come into. When I was at the South Florida Water Management District, I was able to do strategic planning with the organizations that I was responsible for: Public Works, IT, Budget and Finance, Purchasing. And that strategic planning process allowed me to sit with the members of that organization, map out all of their processes, and then take a step back and look at where we could enhance, address, or modify those processes. It also allowed us to see where those processes intersected with other departments. And so at those points of intersection, because we were able to map things out, were opportunities for improvement. And so that gave the staff an opportunity to say, aha, I didn't realize that this was something that was affecting other departments, and here's how I can change what I'm doing in order to improve it. It gave me the opportunity to see staff in action, to understand what their backgrounds were, how involved they were, what was their knowledge base in terms of their own functions. You'd be surprised how many times staff members are not aware of what the expectations are of their roles and responsibilities. They come in, they do what they're supposed to do, what they think they're supposed to do, but that necessarily isn't necessarily what the organization needs. And so strategic planning is a mechanism that I use to help push for my leadership philosophy forward.
Thank you.
Commissioner Swindle? Could you please tell us what the most difficult professional relationship you have had and how you managed ongoing interactions with that person?
Sure. So a difficult situation, professional situation, again, at the Water Management District, is I took over responsibility for the Public Works Department. And in the Public Works Department, we had 52 employees. Um, uh, 36 of them were in one division and the balance were in a different division. The director of one of those departments, I found out about 2 to 3 weeks into my leadership of that department, referred to me in his staff meeting using a racial slur. I won't repeat it, but it got back to me. And so, as was our custom within our policies, I was required to suspend him. It was a 2-week suspension. The first week of the suspension is without pay. Then the individual is supposed to come back in and have a conversation with me as the manager, and then that determines whether it's a second week of suspension with or without pay. And so he came in after his first week and said to me, "I'm going to resign. I've been here for 23 years, and I know you're not going to give me a fair shake, and so I might as well go ahead and resign." And I told him then, I said, "It's not about whether I like you or not. If you want to design, that's up to you. I can't influence that decision. But I will tell you that, excuse me, as long as you serve under my direction, I'm only asking you to do your job. I'm asking you, because there's a command and control structure, to endear in the chain of command a respect for the chain of command. And if you want to call me names before you get to work, if you want to call me names after you leave work, that's your prerogative. But you don't do it during work hours on this property." I said, "All I'm asking you for is to do your job. If you can do that, then I can work with you. I don't expect you to love me or to like me. I just expect you to do your job." And so he took the second week of his suspension, and to my surprise, he came back, and he was my model employee for the next 3 years that I was there. Such that in that year, I recommended him for a merit increase. And I had to fight with HR because HR said, "You can't give him an increase when you suspended him." And I said, "But when I suspended him, he served out his suspension. It would be double jeopardy if I then did not give him the merit increase that he deserved because he did everything that I asked him to do." The key that he mentioned in his evaluation was he didn't think that I would work with him based on him doing his job. And so that realization is what changed his mind. And I'm happy to say that every April 16th, I get a birthday card from him. And so that was a difficult situation that fortunately we were able to turn into a positive.
Commissioner Benson?
If a department has more work than they can get accomplished during their current resources, with their current resources, how would you approach problem solving in that situation, and why?
Well, I think it's important for a manager to have an open mind and be versatile and flexible and problem solving. And I think what you're looking for is somebody who is a critical thinker, who's open-minded, who can think outside the box. Just as a prelude to answering your question, the fact that I've been able to live and work in multiple places across the country has taught me two things: that every community is different, but every community has elements that are the same. We all have to use sidewalks, we all have to use roads, we all have to flush our toilets. Those are the things that unite us, even though there are differences. People talk about innovation, thinking outside the box. I don't think it's any brilliance of mine bringing to the table innovation. For me, it's just bringing to the table my experiences in different places, because I've seen different people do the same things differently. So when you're looking at a situation where there is more work for a department than is needed, that's one of those things that I believe requires out of the box type thinking. What are the aspects of the department that can't be achieved in order to make sure that the trains run on time? What are the aspects of that department that are a risk to making sure that the trains run on time? Those are the two things that you have to be clear about. You need to make sure that the trains run on time, and then those issues that are the risks, you need to address those risks. Now, if there are other things that are growth-oriented or change-oriented, then you can push those, set those aside and address those. Now, if the assessment says that the risk associated with the trains running on time is more than the department can handle, then you need to look at how you can get assistance from other departments. Again, that goes back to the collaboration. How can you get a team of teams working well together? And department heads have to be willing and honest enough to be able to say, hey, my department is having trouble in this area. They need to feel safe to say that and not be chastised because of that. And so that's part of the manager's responsibility, to create that safe space so that you can have collaboration across the organization. Now, let's say in your scenario, there is not a way for other departments to be able to provide assistance. Then we need to look at how we can contract an outside services. It may be something that intergovernmental relationships can assist with. Perhaps it's a finance area that a neighboring community can assist with on a part-time basis. Whether it's a charge or whether it's free, maybe it's a commensurate relationship. Those are some of the things that I would like to try to bring to the table to address those situations. Cool.
As we move toward concluding our time together today, what attributes and characteristics of note do you bring that may distinguish you from the other high-quality candidates, that have applied for the position of city manager?
Sure. So I've talked a little bit about that in my responses to the various questions. I think fundamentally what gives me an edge over other candidates is the flexibility and versatility of my background. The fact that I have sought and acquired mastery in multiple different disciplines on a professional level. The fact that I have an academic background that covers multiple areas of responsibility. And the fact that I have lived and worked in different areas of the country. I believe those three things come together to give me an edge over what you already have as a very capable field of candidates to consider. But I believe that the fact that I can provide that versatility and flexibility so that I can be the leader that you need today, to be able to provide added value in the areas that are needed today, but also pivot and grow with the organization tomorrow in 5 or 10 years, like I mentioned before. Being able to evaluate the team and say, okay, I'm not here to change what you're, to wholesale throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm here to be able to find ways that I can enhance what you're doing here, there, or another spot. I think you're not going to find somebody in a package that I offer that is capable of doing that. And then a year from now, being able to provide that support in another area of the organization, another area of the department heads or deeper within the organization. I think that it is a skill set that I bring to the table. And in addition to that, the desire to be able to be that public servant that is open and engaging, flexible, that is the type of person that creates calm in the middle or in the sea of change. That's something that I've done in my career. Whether it's a matrix organization or a hierarchical organization, I've been able to focus on addressing the problems at hand, making sure that we resolve those problems and that we move forward in a positive direction. I think that is a value that I bring to the table. And the last thing I would say is stability. I think the reason why I've been successful in various locations that I've worked in is because I've always expressed the importance of stability and getting the intergovernmental relationships to come to the table because they support that stability has been important to the success. People don't want to put their money at risk if they think they're throwing good money after bad. I mean, that's just the reality of it. So coming into a situation like this where you've got a city manager who has done a great job by all accounts, being able to build on that, being able to make staff feel comfortable with their roles and their positions, that the uncertainty is not something that they have to be worried about. The opportunity to make some changes or differences are there, but not that you're in danger of losing your job. I think that's important, and creating that stability is important.
Thank you.
Thank you. Almost done. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the mayor or the commission to let us know a little bit more before we end the discussion today? Or do you have any key questions for us?
So I want to make sure that the commission is aware of, and some of the responses that I provided, I touch on that there are negative press elements out there. And I think if you're honest, every city manager is going to have to deal with that. That's the nature of the business. And much to my wife's dismay, it is an aspect of the work that we do. In any given moment, we have to realize that our job is subject to a vote, and that's the part of being a city manager. So you're going to see media reports out there in the past that that fail to reflect that I've worked myself out of a job in some cases. That I declined to be in job environments because I wanted to make sure that the mayor that I supported me, and if the mayor wasn't going to support me and stand by me, then it didn't make sense for me to be there. And you're also going to find places where media would suggest that I was terminated or fired, and in reality, I resigned. And so I beg you to consider the source of those situations. I ask you to consider the source of those situations and realize that in every situation where I've been, I have exceeded expectations. I've been put in situations where I've been asked to do work that everybody else failed at doing, and I was able to be successful. In those media reports, they often fail to talk about all the positive things. They only want to focus on an aspect of negativity, and oftentimes that's not accurate information in and of itself. So I want to make sure that you're aware of that, and I'm happy to be open and honest and transparent if there are any questions about that. And so.
Does the commission have any other follow-up questions based on some of the questions that we've already heard?
I guess I wasn't supposed to share my birthday. You know? It's out there.
Let's say state wakes up one day on your birthday and is like, you know what, City of Lapeer, you're doing a fantastic job. Here's $1 million. How would you go about spending that $1 million?
Wow. For the city of Lapeer?
Not personally.
Okay, all right. Because the Bahamas are calling right about now. So I think when you're given, and American Rescue Plan funding is similar to that in the way that the federal and state government allocated that. What you have to be aware of, that I would ask you to be aware of in spending funding, is you want to invest money in things that are going to create a return. So $1 million is what I call sugar. It's a temporary high. It's a finite amount of money, and it's going to go away. Unless it's going to be $1 million every year, then you plan for that. But if it's a finite amount of money, you have to make sure that you spend it in a way that is going to create revenue long term. And so for me, it would be addressing things that have long-term impacts, like infrastructure. Now, in some of the communities where I've worked, $1 million would be a drop in the bucket for infrastructure issues. So you also have to make sure that you spend it in a way that has impact. And so things like economic development, your parks and rec, those are things that I think would provide you with long-term benefits, residual benefits that come back to you. I think technology is an area, and again, I'm a little biased, having worked at IBM, to technology, but I think investing in technology, for instance, BSNA has multiple modules, but there's also the BSNA in the cloud. Transitioning from those multiple modules to BSNA in the cloud is a game changer for organizations that will save you money 10, 15 years down the road. To me, that's worth it, because the module version, every day you have an update and they don't communicate, even though they're supposed to communicate. Great software, but in the cloud, it addresses all those issues. So $1 million, I think you have to put it in things that are going to give you long-term benefits and rewards coming back to the organization.
Everybody set?
No, you are set.
I do have a question. Hi. You are a good Google read. There's a lot on you, and of course, you always have to consider the source of who's writing or perpetuating the articles and how they're written. Noting that you are also one of the top 3 candidates for the city of Birmingham, and their decision is coming up in June for their replacement or the transitional time. If we were to offer you a position here, is there a length of commitment that you would be willing to give the city of Lapeer for the position? I mean, are you at a point, I know we're apples and oranges, but in the same token, if we both reached a conclusion, are you committed to Lapeer?
Yes, so that's a good question. I'm glad that you asked that. ICMA requires that you, when you go to a new position, that you commit to at least 2 years as part of the code of ethics. For me personally, I've got kids that are in elementary school that are going into middle school and so on and so forth. I would like to be in a location where they can graduate from high school. And so that's what I'm looking for in terms of opportunities. And the commission might say that 5 to 10 year span to get them through may not be something that you're looking for, but me personally, that's what I'm looking for. So if that was something that Lapeer the city of Lapeer was offering and looking at, then the minimum amount of stay that I would be looking at would be getting my kids through high school. And the second thing that I would say is I'm one of those people that's task oriented. I hate to leave things undone that I've started. And so, touching a little bit on that $1 million opportunity, I didn't mention succession planning. Every organization that is resilient needs to have succession planning in place. The problem is succession planning is not cheap. And so if I had $1 million that I could put into succession planning to create the resilience in the organization, that's an investment that will pay off down the road. I would not like to leave an organization unless I know that organization would not skip a beat when I leave. And so that's a commitment that I have anywhere that I go. So.
Can I ask a second question?
Please, sure can.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Most people know I ask questions. Can you give me an example of residential housing development in one of the city or locations that you've been responsible for procuring?
Sure. So in my most recent employment, we had over 1,000 vacant lots. And so we created a program under the umbrella of Reaching New Heights that allowed us to transition people from renting to owning by asking each of the developers that purchases those lots, develops on them, to bring 3 things: credit repair, down payment assistance, and mentorship over 3 years. As a result of that project, we've been able to secure additional funding coming into the organization to be able to support that initiative. But the key thing there is, number one, realizing that there are vacant lots that have an opportunity to be built on, realizing there's a need for density, realizing there's a need for attainable housing, and putting together with that the programming to attract families and creating intergenerational wealth by transitioning people from renting to homeownership. So I should have mentioned that previously, but I'm glad you asked that question, because that's one of the things that I think I've done that is exceptional for the community where I was at.
Thank you.
I believe we are all set. I would really like to thank you for applying for the city manager position and for coming on a great weather day.
Absolutely.
Enjoy your day, and thank you, and James will
Cheers.
be reaching out to you.
Okay, thank you very much.
we had 40, like half an hour.
Yeah, we need more questions for next
You love
week.
them or you hate them.
For next week? Oh,
Settle down.
let's get through
We don't
today.
need more
Let's get through today.
to fill the time.
Yeah, because we've already booked them, the same as today.
We should have hired Mr. James over here to have the demo as well. No, that's next Saturday. No, that's next week.
All right.
Definitely.
Coffee's doing its job.
Madam Mayor, we're in recess, correct?
What do you do?
Yes.
Yes,
sir.
yes, thank you.
For Kelly.
Great.
Good for us.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
I felt light when I came in, it felt like a funeral for a second.
Uh-oh. You mean just because we're right next to the funeral home? Nice to meet you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the city of Lapeer. Thank you for traveling here, whether it was last night or this morning. The roads are like they normally are. But this should be nice. But thank you. So, we had the opportunity to do an initial review, assessment of you based upon your resume and your responses to the candidate questionnaire. We would like to learn a little bit more about you as an individual. Can you give us a sense of who you are from a personal standpoint?
Okay, yeah. So it's funny, I was just at this city manager conference a couple of weeks ago, and I was talking with one of the recruiters, different recruiter, Mr. Freed. And he was saying that, often when they are asking that question, they're not asking you about your business and professional history. They've already got your resume, right? So it just feels a little awkward saying, oh, well, I've got a beautiful wife and I've got 4 dogs and all that type of stuff. But, this will be a long-term marriage between the city council and the city manager. So I totally get it. You want somebody who's kind of the same kind of ideology and, lives the same kind of lifestyle that you're looking for. So I'll start with that. I have a beautiful wife. She's an attorney. She's way smarter than I am. We've got 4 dogs. We like to rescue senior dogs and dogs who have special needs. We're also world travelers. I've got a scuba diving trip to Bonaire coming up here in a couple of weeks. And then my wife convinced me to go on a Disney cruise here in, I think, the beginning of May. So these were all long planned, long time ago, so I apologize for that. I like playing computer games. I run half marathons. Last year I ran and biked about 900 miles. I've got family in Canton. I've got family in Commerce Township. So I grew up on this side of the state in Troy. Lived in Shelby Township for a long time. I interned with the Village of Lake Orion, so just down the road from here. So yeah, I'm a Michigan boy through and through. I'm 41 years old now, I think. I spent 40 of those here in Michigan. I spent 1 year in the city of Pittsburgh, which enabled me to go visit Gettysburg. I'm a Civil War buff. Also, just a history buff in general. I just got done listening to a lecture series about the Tudors and the Stuarts in England. So I'm sure this is sounding very dorky to everybody in the room, but that's who I am. I believe in altruism. I believe in public service, and that's probably what has driven me into this profession. When I'm not in the office, I'll go and take my newly purchased gas-powered snowblower out, and I will help people who can't get out of their driveways. I'm sure your DPW has done it already, but I help clear the libraries, parking lot. It's just who I am. I believe in public service and doing what's best for the public.
Commissioner Adler.
Yes, what prompted your decision to leave your current place of employment or look for an alternative position and apply to be Lapeer's next city manager?
Yeah, so I never liked this question because I love my community. I've been there for 7 years. I've got tons of friends. My bosses are great. I've done so much. I feel very accomplished in my community. And I'm sure people would love to have me there forever. I looked at this position because it's a step up professionally for me. My current community is about 3,600 people. And it's a larger budget, it's more complex, and it's something I'm looking forward to improving my skills with. Also, I love the west side of the state, I really do, but I grew up in Metro Detroit. I've got a gaggle of nieces and a nephew that are just down the street from here. I'd like to see them through their teenage years so they know that their Uncle Mike is somebody that's only 45 minutes down the road. But I also really like the kind of small town atmosphere that I currently have. I know all the business owners by first name. They all got my cell phone number. I walk and I get my coffee and my pastries in the morning, and then I go get lunch at the local deli. I didn't want to be in the inner ring community in Metro Detroit. I was offered a position down there a year ago. I turned it down. And, you know, this community has that small town feeling. I went around to all the businesses yesterday. I got a great coffee over at Cream, chatted with a bunch of people, your DDA director, Chamber of Commerce, Nita. And I really like kind of the small town feeling I got here. I met with some of your staff people, got a tour of City Hall as well. I really enjoyed going to visit last night.
Commissioner Stroh?
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning.
What are your impressions about the challenges and possibilities for the city of Lapeer?
Well, a big one's going to be with your business community. You know, normally, at least this is my opinion, this process would take a couple weeks longer. It would give me more time to chat with more people, do a little bit more investigations. It was a little compressed for my taste. But I was able to speak with a number of business owners and some of your government employees and other local governments nearby to get their impressions at the time. And there were a lot of mixed feelings about the relationship between the government and the local business community. You know, there was the impression that perhaps City Hall wasn't pro-business, wasn't doing their best to promote business. Again, normally I would come into town and I would go through all the parks, and I'm a jogger, so I like to jog through the parks. Even though I'm just a little too old now to play on the play sets, I like playgrounds. So I like to check that out. But if you guys didn't notice, there was about a foot of snow right now, and it was pretty cold yesterday, so you can get a chance to do that. But you know, I truly believe in kind of this this triangle of, you know, businesses are what bring in people. People want amenities. Amenities can be paid for by the property taxes, you know, being paid for by the businesses. So you kind of create this holistic approach to, you know, everybody kind of working with each other to have all the things that you want in a successful community. You know, I've only been here for a couple hours. I don't know everything, certainly. And I'm sure that being on the job, you would see certain ways you can fix and move things around. It's a nice community. I walked up and down your streets. You've got nice sidewalks, the roads are in good condition. Of course, everything can be better. But, you know, it's got a good building base. I think it just takes somebody with maybe an outside pair of eyes to come in and say, you know, we could do this better.
Commissioner Swindell? So what is the most important task or function of a city manager and why?
You didn't look too enthused with that question.
Not my favorite one.
So you didn't.
Everything you do is important, so it's
Yeah.
really just not my favorite.
Okay, so you didn't choose that question. Okay. Yeah, I mean, so fundamentally, it's taking the policies and the legislation of the, you know, city council and enacting it into, you know, the processes of the government. That's the simple answer. That's the academic answer. That's what you're going to find in your charter, your ordinances. I kind of wish I printed out my answers that I got to write out for you, because I thought that was much better that I'll elucidate right now. But, you know, it's a narrative. It's a working relationship between the council and the manager's office. I've been in theater for 7 years. I will never be a local. They remind me of that. You know, I don't know. So when they refer to the Jones place or the Smith place, I have no idea what they're talking about. You know, I know the addresses. I know it on a professional basis. But my city council members, my most recent mayor has been in the town for 65 years. My current mayor, she's been in the city for 30 plus years. You know, they know more people than I probably ever will. And they're able to help guide me and my staff through me to making a better community. I mean, it's a very complex answer, but I could talk for days. I hear I'm limited to 45 minutes, so I'll try to be concise, but I see it as a very good working relationship between the legislative body and the manager's office to ensure that the staff are doing what's best for the community.
Commissioner Patterson?
Good morning. Could you please give us some examples of how you've worked to collaborate with elected officials in your previous or current role?
specifically elected officials? Okay. Just because I work with all sorts of officials, appointed officials, which actually make up the bulk of my work with planning commission, DDA, and library boards, and all sorts of things. But again, similar to the previous answer, I work with all of my council members, both as a board and as individuals. You know, each of my council members do different things. I've got a school teacher, I've got a nurse. You know, they all have unique perspectives about what they see in the community, what they hear in the community, the circles that they move in. So I really kind of see it as both an equal and a servant leadership kind of relationship. Where on one hand, you know, you're talking as two adults, we're both professionals in the local government. And, you know, I'm not here all the time. You have different neighbors than I might have. So you can tell me on an equal basis, oh, hey, if there's a big pothole here, there's a tree that you can trim there, you can't see the stop sign, whatever. But also, you know, I need to be able to provide professional servant leadership to the board because this stuff is complex. I certainly don't understand all of it. I've got mentors that I talk to, and hopefully you would see it the same way, you, but everybody, that the city manager is the professional, and they're there to help you take your vision of the community and make it reality. So that there would be respectful, mutual respect relationship there, where what you want to see done, you can tell the manager and, you know, professionally and kindly see that it's followed through. Sure.
As a city manager, what groups would you expect to communicate with on a regular basis? And what would you do to establish and keep channels of the communication open?
It's probably too simple just to say everybody, right? I mean, look, you work with the city council on a very regular basis. You work with your staff on a daily basis. The newspapers, local media, although I'm a little disappointed you didn't put my pretty face on the front of the page, front page of the newspaper recently. The planning commission, the DDA, the library board, the staff at the library, the county commissioners, county staff, citizens. You know, I maintain an open door policy in my city, where if you have an issue and I have the time and ability, I will resolve it. But I can't fix problems I don't know about, right? And that's kind of how I see my position ultimately writ large, is that I'm here to fix problems. I'm also here to identify and come up with solutions for problems, but if I don't know about the problem, I can't fix it. So really, I would do my best to communicate with everybody. I didn't mention business owners, but I do, like I said, I was already doing that. DDA chamber, because you know, they're also professionals who are out in the community on a daily basis, and they see all the stuff. So really, communication is key in this job. Frankly, I don't know how you can do it without having good, effective communication.
Commissioner Patino?
Mike, I feel you've already kind of answered this question, so you might have to repeat yourself.
Okay. I'll do my best.
So, how do you envision getting engaged within the community of Lapeer?
Well, yeah, I am repeating myself, and I apologize about that. I mean, the first and easiest is to go to the businesses. You've got some great businesses here in town. I had an amazing coffee at Cream yesterday. I talked to Troy on his way out, and I sent him there as well. Although I told Samantha that she needs to put maybe Cream a little bit easier to identify versus Blondie's because of the signage issue. And I'll probably go there on my way out of town because she needs, you know, honey lavender coffee, which was amazing. I also had a great pizza at Tilted Access last night. Visiting the businesses in your community and having the business owners know that you're in there, not only just shopping, but I talked with, is it Mr. Byer, Mr. Breyer, the furniture store person? Byer. I have no need of furniture right now. Maybe when I buy a house, I will. But there, you know, you don't have to buy furniture every day just to go see them, right? Having business owners have your cell phone number. Every business in my city has my cell phone number. And I would talk to 2 or 3 of them regularly. And frankly, if I'm too busy, they send me a text or a voicemail, and I'll deal with it later. I think in this day and age, it's probably a little creepy to go door to door and knock on citizens' doors. You might get shot for your efforts. So probably wouldn't do that. But I show up at festivals. I show up at the concerts in the park, the farmers market. And I don't wear a sleeve that says city manager, come talk to me, or nothing like that. But I'm just a friendly guy. I want to interact with people, and we talk, and I say, how do you like the community? Is there anything you see that we could do better? And you can really foster some good dialogue with the citizens that way. And just the story came up the other day, so I'll tell it. So I understand you guys have a great pre-festival here in the community. It's 3 days long. We also have a festival. It's a Red Flannel Festival. And apparently prior to me being in town, I've been now 7 years there, City Hall just shut for the day and everybody kind of ignored the city, right? It's put on by volunteers, city government's not involved. Well, it's our festival. It's what brings people into town. It's what we're known for. How can a city manager skip out on that? That drives me nuts. That other people might do that. So for 7 years, my job has been to keeping City Hall open, both as a warming shelter and weather shelter because it's in October, you never know, but also to keep the bathrooms open. My city doesn't have a lot of free open bathrooms. And people don't like porta-johns, we try, but they don't. So on the biggest day, biggest festival in my town, I spend all day in City Hall keeping the bathrooms open. It's just one of the tiny little things that city manager should be doing, kind of as a cheerleader for your town, to do something nice for the community. And just for the record, I do recruit city council members to do that with me, so.
Commissioner,
Provide an overview and assessment of your biggest professional failure.
Yeah, I don't like failing. It's one of those things that drives me nuts. So I always do my best and go at it as hard and as long as I have to succeed. I'm not sure I have anything that truly ever failed on me. I've been very successful in my life and my career. I've had a lot of things where it took multiple tries to get it done. I had one instance where I was a practicing attorney and I filed for an expungement for a client who I truly honestly thought was innocent and just could not get it through the court system. This is down in Wayne County Circuit Court, kind of difficult to deal with sometimes. As a practicing attorney, sometimes you're busy, you forget about things that fall off your plate. And it went on for so long that my client, who was a very nice guy, very easygoing guy, finally had to call me up and say, Mike, what happened? Why isn't this moving forward? And I felt so bad because, of course, I'm living my own life, I'm doing my own career, I'm helping 30 or 40 other people at the time. And I'd forgotten that this expungement case had kind of gone into court. We never got a hearing, never went in front of the judge. It kind of died. Now, again, thankfully, this was a felony case that was 15, 20 years ago. The guy kind of moved on with his life, but he still wanted expungement. So I felt very bad about that. I would classify that as a failure in my life. The good ending of that story is I finally was able to go down to circuit court, talk to the clerk, get it on the agenda for a month or two later. Went in front of the judge, and this is before all the expungement kind of rules changed, and got him his expungement. So I failed the first time, and I succeeded the second time. But I don't like failing, and if it's within my power to do, I've been very successful in my life. I apologize. I know this is kind of a one-sided conversation. If I don't answer your question, I would like to get a prompt to continue, please. Or a redirection, because of course you get on a line of thought, and if it doesn't answer your question, I'm not doing you any favors.
Commissioner Stroh.
Yes. If you could, give us an example of how you've handled a rejection or dismissal of an idea or policy in a professional context.
I try to be successful. I try to be a smart person, but certainly I'm not the expert in so many different areas. A good city manager is a jack of all trades, of course, master of none. I do try to know as much as I possibly can about any situation. It's a very boring thing reading, white pages at night after you go home from work. So the next morning you have a conversation about LDFAs or some snow equipment that your DPW wants, then you'll be more knowledgeable about it when you have a conversation next morning. But, I trust my subject matter experts, my department heads, my city council members. I'm here to provide professional advice. I'm here to hear everyone's ideas, and sometimes the buck stops with me, sometimes it stops with you guys. But, I take it very not personally. I'm a professional through and through when it comes to this. At home, I do what my wife tells me to do, but here, part of it's democratic. Part of it is you guys get to vote on stuff. Some of it with my staff. 99% of the time, I'm going to go with what my department head says. Sometimes it's, yes, you're right, but there's a political thing going on here that kind of influences the decision that's being made. And that's also part of my job. I'm not political. I am politically savvy. So I understand politics, but I don't let my politics get in the way of kind of what's going on. I want to do what's best for the community.
Thank you.
Commissioner Swindell?
Did you get one that you wanted to ask this time?
It's a lot better.
Okay.
Describe a situation that exemplifies your philosophy of leadership.
Oh, I like to think of my leadership as kind of an adaptive style. You hear the phrase servant leadership and, all sorts of assertive and aggressive and passive and whatever else. Some people need a friend, some people need a leader, some people need a coworker. Really, your leadership style should be adapted to the situation that you're in. I'm a very easygoing guy, like I said, with my department heads, with staff. For the most part, it's a democratic relationship. I'm only the boss insofar as sometimes I have to make decisions. I don't like bossing people around. Matter of fact, I told my finance director recently, she brought her son in, a college-age kid, and she introduces me as, here's my boss. I said, oh, geez, don't call me that. I'm not the boss. I'm the city manager. There's a difference. So I try to bring people together. I try to get a collaborative opinion. And frankly, if there's a disagreement that we can't agree on, then I'll make a decision. But I'm by no means the perfect person. I'm not, subject matter expert on everything. And sometimes you just have to deal with people who are upset that their decisions were not the ones that were chosen. Did that answer the question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Madison?
Yes, could you give us some examples of how you've worked to shape the culture of previous organizations that you've worked for? And what type of culture did you attempt to cultivate and why?
Yeah, so Cedar Springs was, I would say, a toxic work environment when I came on board. And besides that, that's just wrong. It's not how I am. I believe in, to the extent possible, friendship at the workplace. If you can't have friendship at the workplace, you can have friendly professionalism. But it's multifaceted. You've got staff who have to be together 8 to 10 hours a day, sometimes longer if you've got night meetings. And you also have to remember the human element. We passed a family, a paid family leave in my city because we had a city clerk who wanted to have a kid, and we wanted her to be, our city clerk, but she couldn't, do both of these things at the same time. So I can get into the length of it, but we try to make sure that the city government is, in addition to working for the public, working for its employees too. One of the things that I could talk at length about this one for days, but when somebody comes into City Hall, I don't want them to feel like they're not welcome. And it's a ridiculous thing to have to say because that should be the base, what everybody's doing. But before Cedar Springs, it was, well, what do you want? What are you doing here? Instead, it should be, how can I help you? I'm literally here to serve you. In one of my responses, I was telling you about how I even used to say, city manager, how can I help you? On the phone, and I've now since changed it to city manager, my phone, how can I help you? To personalize kind of the interaction. Sometimes people come into City Hall and they're grumpy and you kind of have to talk them down, and that can ruin your day too. But yeah, you want to have you want to have a city hall that is responsive and friendly to the public, amongst other things. I'm sorry, I got off track a little bit. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, let's repeat the question.
Please, and just to make sure I covered my bases.
Yeah. Examples of how you've worked to shape the culture of previous organizations you've worked with.
Okay.
And what type of culture did you attempt to cultivate and why?
Okay, so just a minor addition to that then, and that is, I personally believe in my power to shape the culture. And one of the things I'd like to do, although unfortunately I didn't get to do it today, is bring in cookies and donuts for my DPW staff when they push snow. My department head meetings, I bring in cookies and donuts or whatever else treat that is that day. It's difficult to be upset when you've got a full stomach, right? Business owners, school superintendents, whoever I'm meeting with that day, I almost always buy lunch, for the other person. I've got the money, it's one of those things that people really decide. You can get some tough meetings done that way by buying the other person lunch. But yeah, food is one of the primary ways where I kind of set the positivity of the interaction.
Thank you.
Mike, what is the most important or the most difficult professional relationship that you have had, and how have you managed the ongoing interactions with that person?
Yeah, I've got one right now. Unfortunately, and I'm not going to give away too many details, although if you know my community, you know who I'm talking about. Yeah, I've got a difficult elected official in another community who unfortunately we share a joint board with. And despite the conflict of interest, he's on that joint board as well. And we're pretty much diametrically opposed in so many different ways. But I would never, ever sink to a point of cruelty or treating him or anyone interacting with him in any different way than professionally and fairly. I don't have to like the person to treat them professionally and fairly. All citizens, all elected officials, all board members, they all deserve that bare minimum. I'm probably giving away too much, but when I like you, I tease you a little bit. It's kind of how I have my relationships. And that means that when I don't like you, I can be just fair and smile and nice, but professional, and I'm not inviting you for a barbecue at my house. But yeah, I mean, that's how all people should treat everybody all the time, in my opinion.
Okay. So in a scenario, if a department has, say, more work that it can accomplish, with whatever current resources are available, the department's overwhelmed to get tasks done. How would you approach problem solving the situation?
Yeah, so again, like I wrote in my written responses, I see myself as the first level of support for my staff. I'm a pretty good generalist. I'm good at a lot of different things, and I'm happy to help. If I can help a person accomplish their work, then it kind of saves us all the rigmarole of tying in other people. But part of the city manager's job is to allocate resources, what's available and where they need to go. So if my staff comes to me and say, hey, I need assistance with whatever, we will then sit down and say, okay, well, who's available and who can we get to help you? And if not, then we start going through the process of, well, what's the time frame that this has to be done? If you have multiple things that have to be done, what's the more important of the things that needs to be done? So it's a prioritization of what needs to get done and what can you do to get it done, and then who can you put towards the task.
Commissioner Allen.
As we move toward concluding our time together today, what attributes or characteristics of note do you bring that may distinguish you from the other high-quality candidates that have applied for the position of city manager?
So does this mean we're done, or you guys? I was expecting way more questions than that. Okay. By the way, I love your tie.
Thank you.
I like to have a little color in my get up if I can. So what will distinguish me from other candidates? I mean, look, I know the other candidates, they're good people, they've done good jobs in their communities. But I chose to come here. I've been in my community for 7 years. They love me there. They don't want me to leave. I've never once been fired from any position everywhere because I've worked my butt off. I'm smart, and I'm just generally a good person to be around. So, I want to be here. I've never been fired from any job. When I leave, it's because I chose to, not because I was walked out the door. City managers, sometimes they get the raw end of the deal, and certainly sometimes you get fired when you weren't supposed to, sometimes you were. But I'd like to think that my record of being in one community for 7 years shows that I'm not a job hopper. I'm not somebody who's looking to climb the ladder. I'm not looking to be in Port Huron in 2 years. And it's one of those things where I'd like to be here. I'd like to be part of this community. And hopefully that makes me a step above the other candidates. Sorry, that's a tough question. I don't answer.
Commissioner Stroh.
Well, finally, first of all, thank you for coming over. Is there anything else that you would like to add about yourself, your style, your personality that you think we should know about you toward making a decision?
Sure. So I sometimes feel like I should say this at the beginning of the interviews, but if you haven't figured out by now, I've got something that one of my council people lovingly refers to as resting unhappy face. I've heard it called something else, but resting unhappy face. I'm actually very happy to be here, even though my face may not say it. But then you combine that with my kind of dry sense of humor, and sometimes people don't always pick up on it. So people tend to love me the second time they meet me, not the first time they meet me. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed meeting a lot of people yesterday. I met with the assistant library director. I met with a bunch of business people. And I think those kind of one-on-one interactions out on the street, not in this format, are a little easier to be personable. So I apologize, I'm not always as personable or, I guess, laughable and easy to get along with as some of the other candidates can be. But leave it at that.
Do any of the commissioners have any follow-up questions?
I do.
Great.
Sorry. I greatly appreciate the fact that you took it upon yourself to reach out to not only the DDA, but the chamber and also some of the local businesses. It was noted before today and before you disclosed it was, welcome to small town, which people were calling me going, I just got a call from so-and-so. And I'm just like, that's fantastic. It's great to know that you were eager. My question to you is regarding residential development. We've not really just talked on it much within the interview packet, but have you been at the helm or in charge of residential development in Cedar Springs? And if so, how successful has it been?
Yeah. So I'm the, not the chairperson, I'm the, I guess, executive director of the planning commission. I'm their primary person that they work with. I'm also the zoning administrator, which recently I became a master citizen planner. So I've asked my city council to start referring to me as the master city manager. They're not going for it. So Grand Rapids has seen a huge influx of people for the last 7 years. I can't believe I'm saying 7 years, but 7 years that I've been there. And so housing has just gone through the roof. My wife is a real estate agent amongst many other things, an attorney, and smarter than me. And she's been looking at this local community. There's just not that much available. Same thing in my city. But I put together 140 new homes. They're being currently developed. They've got phase 2 set to go this spring. They've all got the utilities and the roads and everything already in. And I'm currently working on a package for 165 apartments. My city 7 years ago was not business friendly. They didn't want development. It was an old farming community, and we want to stay a small town forever. But my new council saw it differently, and they ordered me to be business friendly and bring in new development, all those things. And then so we've been changing laws and extending utilities and all sorts of things. But utility extension is expensive and difficult, and there is a difference in philosophy from person to person about who pays for it. And how do you pay for it? I mean, do you put together a TIFA district, pay for it over time? Do you extend it and do tie-in tap fees? There's different ways to do these things. But also, it comes down to what do you guys want? On one hand, you put in new residential development and you can have more people to come and enjoy your businesses and your restaurants. On the other hand, it increases the complexity of the utility system and how do you pay for these things? And, if you are 12,000 instead of 8,000, 9,000, now are you too crowded? So it's a philosophy of the city council, and hopefully with the planning commission, and master plan and all sorts of other things. But, I'm here to do what the council wants. And hopefully there's at least one house available for me. But yeah, beyond that, it's what you guys want to do.
Okay, thank you.
I have well, we kind of asked this before, of why you applied for the city manager, but here, what attracted you to Lapeer? When you first applied, like,
Yeah, I mean,
Lapeer.
not to be dry about it, but 3,600 people, it's a small town. I've been looking in the 7,000 to 12,000 person range, and I've received a few interviews, but didn't close the deal for one way or the other. I want a small town where it's still big enough to have businesses. It's still big enough to have money to do stuff. And like I said, I love West Michigan. I love the fact that from 20 minutes out to my front door, I can be in downtown Grand Rapids, which is a huge city with all these neighbors. But my nieces and nephews, I see them once or twice a year. My nephew is almost 10 years old now, and he's almost a little man, and while his other uncle's just fine, he really needs his Uncle Mike. And he's 40 minutes from here. So it's an alignment of a lot of factors. Normally I get to come in with these great stories of, oh yeah, I ran a race in your town, or I used to go to the ice cream shop on the corner or whatever, but I don't have as many connections to the city. The closest I would have is, I was in Lake Orion as an intern with Darwin McClary. So I'm familiar with the area to that extent, but in the last couple of days and a couple of times that I've been here, I was here a couple of weeks ago as well, you just have a nice little community. I know Dale's on his way out, but over his tenureship, he's put together a decent government. The downtown is in good shape, and so there's nothing glaringly obvious wrong with the community that I can see. So it's just a nice little community.
Yeah, what's your favorite dad joke and why? I'm just, that's not really my question.
No, I was thinking, so I'm not a dad. Wife and I were not blessed with kids. The dogs don't understand the jokes. And I'm more of a punny dad, to go with the dry sense of humor. So I apologize, no dad jokes here.
All right. Let's say the state of Michigan wakes up one day and is like, hey, City of Lapeer is doing some great stuff. We're just going to give you $1 million. What would you do with that million? How would you go about spending it?
Well, I wouldn't put in a disc golf course because I hear that's already happening. And of course, you're living in fantasy land. If Michigan's ever going to just throw money at us, bless that hurts. I've got ideas, but again, this goes back to I'm not a local. I don't think I ever will be based on my experience in Cedar Springs. I don't know what the community wants, and I'm not here to spend $1 million on what I want. The disc golf course, my brother plays disc golf. He loves it. I don't. I want a running trail. That's what I'd like. I'd like a trail that goes from here to the next community so that I can hop on my bike on a Saturday morning, go over there and have lunch, and then come back here and whatever. And same for them. That's what I'd like to spend it on. But, do we have infrastructure issues that we could spend $1 million on? I've got a DPW director, I'm sure that can tell me. A police chief, a fire chief, I'm sure that they'd like to have some new vehicles or a turnout gear or bulletproof vests or whatever it is. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know what $1 million is spent on. This is a group effort.
Chris.
I want to ask a question from the back line. You noted some, we'll jokingly call this satisfaction or inadequacy with the
question was, and I think that was that good fun. I love dressing. Give us some, what should the commissioner ask you? A question that you think is most relevant to be asked as a potential incoming candidate that lets you address something that they should know. What's the question?
Yeah, so it's never easy to sit here and orally tell you these things because I have to think on them, right? I'd like to think that my written response were excellent because I had a few minutes to sit about it and think about it. I had a dog curled up on my lap, and it was at my computer and it wasn't being in a room and audience and people judging me. Yeah, it's virtually impossible. I mean, I apologize. I know you're in a very tough position doing what you do. But, my personal opinion, the 3 people you've interviewed today, and I'm sure at least half of the other candidates that you didn't choose to interview, we're all capable of doing the job. City management is very complex. It's hard to do well. I think most people could do it, but not well. So I'd like to think that the personality-driven questions of will I get along with this person are the ones that are important. I hate to use the phrase, could I have a beer with this person? But, do you feel like you could sit down and have a conversation with them and feel like your opinion's been respected, like your opinion's been heard, that there's an appropriate understanding about the relationship professionally between the city council and city council member as a subset of that group and the city management team? I don't know what the questions would be to do that. But I'm at least thankful that I didn't get questions that were hyper related to the finances of the city or something like that, because look, I've got a day job. I didn't have all the time in the world to dive into 150 pages of master plan and budget and all that. I'm certainly capable of doing those things. But if and when Pivot Group or you guys are able to come up with questions that kind of delve into the mind of and personality of the candidate to say, would I like to have a beer with that person? Then you'll have the $1 million question.
If we were to choose you as our next city manager, what do you see is your length of wanting to stay, or how long do you think you could commit to a city in this position?
That's again one of the very tough questions because I don't know. When I went out to Cedar, I said I will stay here as long as it takes to get the job done. And you know what? I honestly thought in the first 2 years, oh yeah, I'll have it all wrapped up and all the things will be done in 2 to 4 years. There's always problems. That's why you have a professional that you pay to do the things we do. And so I also don't know what my future holds. I grew up in Metro Detroit. My family's in Metro Detroit. My best friend is in Ferndale. Right now, I see these people once every other month, maybe. There's also a certain amount of climbing the ladder. I told you before, I like the small town feeling. I do. I really, truly do. I like the festivals. I like being able to see the little car shows up and down the main street. But that doesn't mean in 10 years' time, someone might come to me and offer me $800,000 to be the next city manager of insert name here. And maybe at that point in my life, that'll be more important to me. I don't know. But I think it still holds true what I told Cedar. There's a job to be done. There are issues that need to be resolved. And it's not really that much about the money for me. I shouldn't say that before a contract is offered, but I'm here to build fire stations. I'm here to make sure that the employees are happy when they're serving the public. I'm here to make sure that when the public's at the park, that there's not, rotting equipment that someone's getting hurt on. I take pride and joy in those things. It kind of goes to my altruistic nature and feeling of public service. But I'm not going to be a thumb twiddler. I'm not here to make the trains run on time, although it's part of the job. I want to improve the community. I want to get stuff done. And if it's going to be a position where I get everything done, there's nothing left to do, I might get bored and want to move on at that point.
Very good. Thank you very much.
I believe that concludes our questions. We really appreciate you coming today so that we can have a chance to get to know you and interview you. James Freed will be getting back with you soon.
And hopefully, just one more thing, hopefully I was invited because I was a good candidate, and not because I owe James Freed one beer.
Oh, we didn't know about that.
Okay.
Or I did not.
From the last, what was it, chip shot?
Yes.
Yeah, chip shot that we had at the last golf conference. So, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Hope you enjoyed your pizza last night. I thought mine
It
was
was
very good.
delicious, yes.
There too.
We'll take a.
Have a great
recess.
afternoon. Yes, we're gonna take a 5 to 10 minute recess, gather our stuff and we'll have a discussion.
Thank you.
I think it's a raspberry. It's a muffin.
Madam Mayor, are we in recess?
Yes, we are.
Yes.
Good luck, guys.
Cameras are on.
Okay, we're back on. Thank you, Mike. Okay, James?
So
Update us.
you've had your 3 interviews today. Like I said, I think, said in your last meeting, I think you have 3 qualified candidates. It's about who you feel is the right fit. The question you ask yourself right at the top, does everyone have a top candidate in their head? Who do they think the top candidate is?
I'll say it, yeah.
Don't say it quite yet. What made you think that's your top candidate? What about that candidate made you want to be the top candidate? Was it personality? Was it background? Was it candor?
A particular answer to a question.
Yeah, just, oh, sorry.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just, like what I was paying attention to while these candidates were answering questions was certain words they were using. And the one candidate in particular that I'm impressed with was how often he used community. And that's big. That's a big deal to me. I don't want the candidate to come in and just do a job. You know, I feel like what we need at this time is a very community-oriented individual, and so community was a big term used a lot, and also staff. We use the word staff a lot, and not, you know, they're hired to do their job, and they're the professional in that. And if this individual had to step in, he could, but let's let the professional in their department handle that situation.
Commissioner Patterson has his hand.
Oh, did you? First? Oh, well, please, Commissioner Patterson.
The candidate I have in front, well, actually, all were excellent, so thank you.
Well, that's on you and your community. Thanks for saying that, but that's because you have a community and it was easy to have a quick search to get the candidates.
Very impressed by the work experience, the knowledge, and what Commissioner Atwood said. Commitment to community, commitment to staff, goal orientation, just a good vision of what a city manager needs to be and should be.
Commissioner Stewart?
What was fascinating, yes, I have a front lead in my short list, but from my vantage point, I was also paying attention to their level of engagement and ease of comfortability in speaking and relating to questions. And one of the candidates clearly had a far better connection, vocabulary, and I think thoughtful responses that actually made him a leader in my eyes.
So ability to communicate
Yep.
well, while also
Oh, yeah.
engaging. So there's that intangible.
There's a
component
lot,
of
it
communication.
needs to be engaging, it needs to be, not only are you approachable or friendly, but I think there also needs to be a little bit of an energy or a spark that needs to resonate with people in general.
I'll jump in there. Communication is a real important factor for me, and a lot of the candidates talked about that, but one of the candidates talked about it a little bit more. And it's not just communication with our department heads and our employees. I want that manager to be able to communicate with our residents. I would like the residents and businesses, and us actually, to feel comfortable with an open door policy. That if we need something, questions, that we can have answers. One of the candidates also reached out to other areas. I was impressed by that, because that's one of the things that we, as a commission, I think feel, the majority of us feel, that we need a little improvement on that. I know it's hard to do everything here. do a good job and be able to communicate everywhere. But it's something that is really needed for city government. So, who is the best to do that? Commissioner Jim?
I think we are in a very good position for this community. I'm looking at things for the future of our community and saying, I'm looking at too, that if we were to say go with A or B, our future's okay. We're gonna be okay. You know, and our residents and our staff and our neighboring townships will be the better for it with either of the two that I have in mind. I don't have a front runner because I see X, Y, and Z of positives of candidate A, and maybe something lacking where candidate B has those strengths, are stronger in those things. And this isn't going to be a tough decision, sure, but it's a good decision.
One of the things I would guide the mayor and commission on is the consensus candidate, right? So if it's a jump ball between two candidates, but the majority of the commission would believe that one candidate can work with, it helps breed consensus on issues in the future. You know, what you don't want is like, well, they hired him, I wanted the other guy. You know what I mean? It's like,
Right.
you can't start out that way. But it does, I feel like that's not the place we're at. I feel like there seems to be a consensus. I'm gonna go out there and ask, is the candidate number 3 the consensus candidate?
Hold on. I'm gonna
Okay.
backtrack. Are you willing to give us your sense? And may I ask direct questions?
Yes.
Okay. I know who's in charge. So I was told.
So we are an interesting commission with interesting needs, and we all look at different things.
Yeah.
We all have different things that we see as goals. I think that my front runner is the front runner because they check the boxes with more of the things that we all want and have maybe had trouble with, and they are comfortable doing some of the things that we ask, because it's not always the easy things that we ask of our, we shoot for the stars and sometimes only hit the clouds, and that's okay too, but we're big dreamers and big thinkers, and all of us are just in different ways, and I think one of them is better for all of us. Not just my favorite or her favorite or his favorite, but for all of us to be able to work together with.
So is that
It's hard to decide between the two.
okay?
Any other questions? We'll go to Chris.
I think at this point, versus, instead of us putting a number out there, I'll put the number in their head.
Yep.
And then do like a 1, 2, 3, and have you not do a certain figure, but whatever number. And we're going to use this candidate number. So the order of candidates we have, so 1, 2, 3. Are you opposed to?
I think we should go down the line. So I think go down the line and tell us who your front runner candidates and see what the consensus is.
Yep.
Who are you looking at me?
Wherever you guys want to start.
Okay. Number 2.
Number 2.
Number 2.
Two.
I'm good with 2.
Mine would have been 3.
Okay. Is 2 acceptable to you?
I think he would do a great job. But with me, I think there's a difference between I feel like number 3 is what we need at this point as a city through everything we've been through. On 2, the concern would be commitment to the city of Lapeer and in the city manager job in Lapeer. Just on the fact of he's family oriented, which I love. Let's say the wife gets a better job opportunity, you know, what would happen then? Seems like number 3 would be more apt to be long-term. Can number 2 do the job? Yeah, I believe it could do the job. But,
So it appears that a consensus candidate has emerged. So this is the advice I would give the mayor and commission. When you hire a new city manager, it's like AD and BC, okay? So you're gonna bring in somebody new in this community, and everything that has happened in the last 20 years with your previous management team, this is the fresh start. And so some people who couldn't work with the previous manager, who didn't like the previous manager, people who loved the previous manager, who didn't want to see the previous manager, that's all gone. Whoever takes this position, this is a fresh start for all the commission. And so how we move forward is you'd make a motion to select your lead candidate. Then we begin the formal background investigation, which includes criminal, credit, all of that. And then I have provided a sample contract already to your HR director and your city attorney, so that they begin going through that. I know they've already begun that process. So you not only have to clear the background investigation, which at this point I think would be okay, you also have to begin a mutually agreeable contract, which I think that's something that's the next step. So with that said, I mean, that's where we're at. That's the consensus candidate.
Do you have a question? Mr. Katane?
I'll go ahead and make the motion unless somebody else wants to.
Commissioner Atwood has a question.
Sorry.
yeah, been a while.
While you're thinking, I would also recommend adding a second candidate to your alternate. So say the first candidate gets on the job, or you can't come to favorable negotiations,
Then we can fall back.
we can immediately begin negotiations with the second candidate.
Got it.
That was gonna be my question was, you know, candidates who's also in a job pool as well for another position. And, you know, it's not a guarantee that he'll take us over the other. So that was a little bit concerning to me, as well. So I don't want to lose 3 if that's if number 2 takes the job. So we were talking numbers. You understand what I'm trying to say.
What was, did you have a question?
No, no.
Oh, okay.
Well, no, I'm ready to go when you guys tell me. Okay.
Back to what Commissioner Atwood said, what was the time, or what was the position for candidate number 3? What city was that?
3 or 2?
No, 2.
That was a
Who I wrote down,
June
it was June.
for the other city.
And then how about for candidate 3?
I
I wrote it down somewhere.
I wasn't aware of
You
them.
can't create that pool. So.
He's not in there.
Not-
Okay.
Yeah, the only question, should we poll on the alternate candidate?
So if you said there was a tie between 2, I'm assuming 2 is the consensus candidate, 3 is a consensus for alternate? Would that be fair to say?
So yeah, to reframe it.
Yeah.
If 2 isn't available, is 3 a consensus, yes or no?
Yes.
Like, would you pop on it right away?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
To be clear, that this was a tight race here, right?
Very tight.
So if candidate 2 doesn't come through, we can assure candidate 3 that he was preferred. Yeah, I mean, you weren't the second choice. This was 2 good options to go by.
1A, 1B.
Yeah.
How is it?
I mean, this was, given all 12 candidates that we reviewed, this was an amazing cross sample of applicants. We narrowed it down to the top 3 candidates plus an alternate to begin with, choosing the top 3. I'm stunned that we have the level of professionalism, history, and education that we were able to obtain. But we're also, I view our community as a hot community that has potential for growth. So I don't feel that either are a bad choice whatsoever. One just is above the other in my eyes.
So I would alter your motion to say candidate, lead candidate, the number, and then alternate candidate, the number.
Commissioner Katane.
Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion to move forward with candidate 2 as the lead candidate, candidate 3 as the alternative candidate for the position of city manager, and to direct Pivot Group Municipal Services to conduct a background investigation and provide sample contract to the Director of Human Resources and the city attorney.
Okay, motion was made by Commissioner Katane and supported by Commissioner Patterson. Is there further discussion?
Madam Mayor and Commission, you'll have that sample contract coming from your city attorney, which is the appropriate channel. I know that I will work with your HR director and your city attorney to come to terms with the candidate. Hopefully get that contract to you as soon as possible. On behalf of Chris and I, this has been a very much a pleasure search. This is the kind of searches of which all of our searches could be, where you have a community that people want to go to, that draws out top door talent. It is not always like that. So we thank you for the opportunity to serve the people here and the Mayor and Commission here. Hopefully we've met your expectations and you feel that our services are worth your time.
I do have one further question in that line. Would we? You didn't vote.
Yeah.
I know, but we're still on questions or discussion. Will we have, well, maybe not, I'll ask this. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion's carried. Now I'll ask the question, there's the late, but will we have the opportunity to look at that contract before you actually are sitting down with whichever candidate is going to accept the job? Because there may be, I think there is a couple of sentences in there on benefits that we may or may not want to change or add.
I believe your city attorney and your HR director can have a draft contract to you before the end of Monday.
Okay, that's all. I just want to make sure that we
I would-
will be
I would-
able to review it.
I will advise you this, in the contract, there is severance. No one's gonna move here, no one's gonna bring their family here, and no one's gonna start a new gig if there's no severance. There has to be a reasonable amount of severance clause.
True.
That's standard. We publish the wage at a certain rate, that wage should be in the contract. Industry standard on benefits, that's in there as well. So the contract that we provided your HR director and your city attorney pretty much brings out all the best practices of current municipal contracts around the state. There's nothing in there that is unusual or that would be extreme. It's pretty much the same vanilla template most municipalities use. The city manager serves at the pleasure of the mayor and commission, unless if they terminate for any reason other than just cause, then there would be a small severance to, accept that risk.
There may be requests for post-election extension of severance, which is reasonable.
Sometimes you do a base severance of 6 months, but it's within 3 or 4 months of election, it jumps to 9 months severance. That way, we're approaching next election cycle. Whoever's taking this job may not be working. So they have to take that their risk consideration as well, and that's fair.
So there's mutual risk is what we're trying to say.
Yes.
Generosity on your perspective may ease somebody's transition in.
I believe that we are all set. I'm looking for a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
To adjourn.
Okay.
So quick. Ann.
This
Thank
was
you.
good.
Thank you.
you.
You have done and I stated this earlier, you have done an excellent job. I'm grateful for everything you've done. I felt comfortable right off the bat.
Appreciate it.
Meeting with
We'll need your
James.
testimonials for our website.
Yes,